The Pokhara Airport controversy, when infrastructure becomes a geopolitical chessboard. Over the past 2 decades, Chinese construction expertise has become, well, pretty much synonymous with transformation across the developing world. From the sweeping plains of Central Asia to the rugged terrains of sub-Saharan Africa, and from the bustling ports of Latin America to the remote islands of the Pacific, Chinese-built infrastructure has really reshaped how nations connect, trade, and grow. For countries struggling with limited capital and technical capacity, these partnerships have often represented more than just roads and airports. They've symbolized pathways out of economic stagnation. Yet in early 2024, an unexpected diplomatic storm emerged from an unlikely source. The Himalayan nation of Nepal, a country that had celebrated Chinese infrastructure achievements just months earlier, suddenly declared that a major airport project built with Chinese assistance suffered from quality deficiencies. More dramatically, Kathmandu announced it would refuse to pay the $220 million owed for the construction. The announcement sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and raised, some pretty uncomfortable questions about the true motivations behind such a dramatic reversal. Was this a legitimate grievance about construction standards? Or was something more complex unfolding, a delicate dance of geopolitical maneuvering in which infrastructure became a bargaining chip in the great power competition between Beijing and Washington? Before we dive deeper into this controversy, I invite you to subscribe and enable notifications so you won't miss our in-depth analyses of the forces shaping our interconnected world. Understanding Nepal, a nation caught between giants. To understand this conflict, we must first understand Nepal itself, a country often overshadowed by its massive neighbors, yet possessing outsized strategic importance. Nepal remains predominantly agricultural, with over 2/3 of its workforce engaged in farming. Its economy ranks among the world's least developed, with a GDP per capita hovering around $1,300. Yet what Nepal lacks in industrial capacity, it compensates for in natural grandeur. Nestled in the heart of the Himalayas, this nation of 30 million people sits at the literal and metaphorical crossroads of South Asia. The same mountains that have historically isolated Nepal have also become its greatest economic asset. Mount Everest, the world's highest peak, draws thousands of adventurers annually, each spending thousands of dollars for a chance to stand atop the roof of the world. Beyond Everest, Nepal's trekking routes through the Annapurna Range and other mountain circuits have made tourism the nation's third-largest source of foreign exchange. Pokhara, Nepal's second-largest city, really exemplifies this tourism potential. Located approximately 200 kilometers west of Kathmandu, Pokhara sits at the base of the Annapurna mountain range. The city offers stunning views of snow-capped peaks reflected in tranquil lakes, alongside well-preserved medieval architecture and ancient temples that speak to centuries of cultural richness. For decades, Pokhara has attracted backpackers, spiritual seekers, and adventure tourists seeking authentic Himalayan experiences. But there was always one critical problem holding back this potential: getting there. The transportation bottleneck. Nepal's geography, its greatest asset, was also its greatest liability. The same mountainous terrain that attracted visitors made building modern transportation infrastructure extraordinarily challenging and expensive. Roads wound through treacherous mountain passes, subject to landslides during monsoon seasons. Journey times stretched for hours even between major population centers. Aviation became not a luxury, but a necessity. Yet by the early 2010s, Nepal's entire aviation infrastructure consisted of a single international standard airport in Kathmandu. Pokhara had an airport, certainly, but one barely worthy of the name by modern standards. The Pokhara airstrip measured just 1,400 meters in length and 30 meters in width, dimensions suitable only for small propeller aircraft operating regional routes. International jets capable of bringing tourists directly from major Asian cities like Bangkok, Singapore, or Delhi simply couldn't land there. Yet despite these severe limitations, the airport handled nearly 800,000 passengers annually, a testament to Pokhara's appeal and the desperate need for better infrastructure. The Nepalese Civil Aviation Authority recognized this bottleneck and began planning for expansion. They secured approximately 175 hectares of land, envisioning either a major expansion of the existing facility or construction of an entirely new airport capable of meeting international standards. The vision was clear: transform Pokhara into a true international gateway, allowing tourists to bypass Kathmandu entirely and fly straight to the heart of Nepal's trekking paradise. There was just one problem. Nepal didn't have the money, the expertise, or the industrial capacity to build such a facility on its own. Enter the Belt and Road Initiative. The year 2014 marked a turning point, not just for Nepal, but for infrastructure development across Asia. China's Belt and Road Initiative was gaining momentum, offering developing nations access to Chinese capital, construction expertise, and equipment for major infrastructure projects. For countries like Nepal, this represented an unprecedented opportunity. The timing couldn't have been more fortuitous. Nepal had a pressing infrastructure need. China had the capital and capability to address it. In 2014, after extensive negotiations, Nepal signed a cooperation agreement with the China CAMC Engineering Corporation, a state-owned enterprise specializing in international construction projects. The deal's terms appeared straightforward. China would provide a concessional loan of $220 million to finance construction of Pokhara International Airport. Beyond financing, Chinese contractors would supply technical expertise, construction equipment, and project management. For Nepal, this arrangement solved multiple problems simultaneously. It provided capital the country couldn't raise domestically, technical knowledge it didn't possess, and a pathway to completing the project within a reasonable time frame. The agreement positioned Pokhara International Airport as a flagship project, demonstrating the tangible benefits of Belt and Road cooperation. Construction commenced in 2017 with considerable fanfare. Chinese engineering teams arrived alongside heavy machinery. Local workers received training and employment. Approximately 1,200 Nepalese citizens found jobs on the construction site, bringing steady incomes to their families. The original timeline called for completion by 2021. Then COVID-19 struck, disrupting global supply chains and labor movements. Like construction projects worldwide, Pokhara International Airport experienced delays. The completion date slipped to 2022, then into 2023. When Pokhara International Airport finally opened on January 1, 2023, the mood across Nepal was, well, absolutely jubilant. Government officials spoke of a new chapter in Nepal's development story. The Civil Aviation Authority projected the new facility would handle at least 1 million passengers annually, a transformative increase that would inject significant revenue into the local economy. The airport's specifications were impressive by any standard. Built according to International Civil Aviation Organization Category 4D standards, the facility could accommodate narrow-body jets like the Airbus A320 and Boeing 737, the workhorses of regional aviation. The runway stretched 2,500 meters, with a width of 45 meters, more than adequate for international operations. Modern terminal buildings featured contemporary design alongside traditional Nepalese architectural elements. Local media coverage was, honestly, overwhelmingly positive. Nepalese citizens praised the Chinese infrastructure miracle that had delivered a world-class facility to their city. Government ministers called it a national pride project, symbolizing Nepal's modernization ambitions. Social media filled with photos of proud Nepalese standing before the gleaming new terminal, thanking China for its partnership. The operational data quickly validated the enthusiasm. By October 2023, just 10 months after opening, passenger numbers exceeded 900,000, already approaching the annual projections. Airlines began adding routes, connecting Pokhara directly to major South and Southeast Asian cities. By February 2024, the facility had served over 1.2 million passengers, surpassing all initial projections and operating smoothly according to international observers. The airport appeared to be an unqualified success story, a textbook example of how infrastructure cooperation could deliver mutual benefits, transforming local economies while demonstrating the effectiveness of China's development model. Then everything changed. In mid-2024, less than 18 months after celebrating the airport's opening, the Nepalese government issued a stunning announcement. Officials declared that Pokhara International Airport suffered from significant quality deficiencies. The accusations were broad and, well, pretty damning: substandard construction materials, improper building techniques, and failure to meet agreed specifications. But the Nepalese government didn't stop at technical complaints. Officials publicly accused China of predatory lending practices, claiming that Chinese overseas infrastructure projects were designed primarily to generate profits for Chinese companies, while saddling recipient nations with unsustainable debt burdens. Nepal, they argued, had become yet another victim of this pattern. The conclusion was stark. Nepal would refuse to pay the outstanding $220 million owed for the project. Moreover, officials called for China to forgive this debt entirely, citing the alleged quality issues and Nepal's difficult economic circumstances. The international reaction was immediate and honestly quite divided. Some observers sympathized with Nepal's position, viewing it through the lens of widespread concerns about debt-trap diplomacy associated with Belt and Road projects. Others expressed skepticism, noting the timing and questioning why these issues hadn't surfaced during the construction phase or in the months immediately following the airport's opening when operations appeared smooth. The question on everyone's mind was simple: what had really changed? To understand Nepal's dramatic shift, we must examine a parallel diplomatic track that had been developing for years: Nepal's relationship with the United States and a controversial aid package known as the Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact. The MCC program represents one of America's primary tools for economic engagement with developing nations. Established in 2004, the program provides substantial grants, not loans, to countries that meet certain governance and economic policy criteria. In 2017, the United States selected Nepal for an MCC compact worth approximately $500 million focused on infrastructure development, particularly electricity transmission and road improvement. On paper, this looked like a windfall for Nepal. Unlike loans that require repayment, MCC grants came with no debt obligations. The $500 million represented more than double what China had provided for Pokhara Airport. For a country desperate for infrastructure investment, this should have been an easy decision. Yet the MCC compact became deeply controversial within Nepal, exposing the country's difficult balancing act between its giant neighbors. China viewed the MCC program with suspicion, seeing it as an American attempt to pull Nepal into Washington's strategic orbit. Some provisions in the MCC agreement raised concerns about sovereignty, including language about Nepal's international commitments and potential military cooperation. Within Nepal, the debate split along political and ideological lines. Pro-China factions argued that accepting MCC funding would compromise Nepal's neutrality and damage the crucial relationship with Beijing. Pro-American voices countered that Nepal couldn't afford to refuse such substantial assistance based on hypothetical concerns about sovereignty. The deadlock persisted for years. Nepal's parliament debated, delayed, and divided over the issue. Meanwhile, the MCC compact sat unsigned, the $500 million aid package tantalizingly out of reach. American officials grew increasingly frustrated with Nepal's indecision. Behind closed doors, there were reportedly concerns that Nepal had become too dependent on Chinese influence, making it unable to diversify its partnerships even when offered better terms. Here's where our story becomes less about airport construction and more about great power competition in one of the world's most strategically sensitive regions. For China, Nepal represents several vital interests. First, Nepal shares a border with the Tibet Autonomous Region, which China considers a core security concern. Maintaining friendly relations with Kathmandu helps prevent Nepal from becoming a base for Tibetan separatist activities or foreign intelligence operations targeting Tibet. Second, Nepal sits astride potential transportation corridors, connecting China's interior provinces with South Asia's markets. The proposed China-Nepal Railway, a project that would tunnel through the Himalayas to connect Chinese rail networks with Kathmandu and potentially extend to the Indian border, represents China's vision for continental connectivity under the Belt and Road Framework. Third, Nepal serves as a testing ground for China's soft power approach in South Asia, traditionally dominated by India. Successfully delivering infrastructure projects in Nepal demonstrates Chinese capability while potentially shifting regional alignment patterns. For the United States, Nepal matters for different but equally strategic reasons. As American policy pivoted toward great power competition with China, countries like Nepal, previously peripheral to U.S. strategic thinking, gained new significance. Washington increasingly viewed Belt and Road infrastructure projects as tools of Chinese influence expansion that needed to be countered. The MCC program became America's answer, offering an alternative model: grants rather than loans, transparent processes, and no hidden strategic strings. If Nepal accepted MCC funding while reducing dependence on Chinese projects, it would validate the American approach and potentially inspire similar shifts elsewhere in the region. Nepal found itself caught in the middle, with limited room to maneuver. Rejecting China risked losing access to infrastructure financing and technical expertise that no other partner could provide at similar scale. Rejecting America meant forgoing $500 million in grants and potentially damaging relations with the world's leading economic and military power. Analyzing the airport accusations. So let's return to the core question. Were the Nepalese government's complaints about Pokhara International Airport's construction quality legitimate? The available evidence suggests this narrative is, at best, highly questionable. First, consider the construction process itself. Chinese contractors built the airport according to International Civil Aviation Organization Category 4D standards, specifications used at airports worldwide. International aviation authorities certified the facility as safe for operations. Multiple airlines, both domestic and international, deemed the airport acceptable for their flights. Second, examine the operational record. From January 2023 through early 2024, Pokhara International Airport operated without any reported significant safety incidents, equipment failures, or structural problems. Passenger volumes exceeded projections, suggesting airlines and travelers alike had confidence in the facility. Third, note the timing of the complaints. Quality issues in construction projects typically become apparent quickly, within months, not years. If serious deficiencies existed, they should have surfaced during the extensive inspection and certification process before the airport opened, or shortly thereafter during initial operations. Instead, complaints emerged only after the airport had successfully operated for over a year. Fourth, consider the lack of specificity in Nepal's accusations. Legitimate quality complaints typically include detailed engineering reports, specific deficiencies with photo documentation, and clear violations of agreed specifications. Nepal's government provided few such details, making independent verification impossible. When China responded to the accusations, Chinese officials produced comprehensive construction documentation, quality control records, and certification documents from international inspectors. They pointed to the airport's successful operational history as proof of construction quality. The weight of evidence suggests Nepal's quality complaints were, at minimum, greatly exaggerated, if not entirely manufactured for political purposes. The railway project at risk. Perhaps the most significant casualty of this controversy could be the proposed China-Nepal Railway, a project that would dramatically transform Nepal's economic prospects while cementing Chinese influence in the region. This railway concept envisions a line extending from China's existing rail network through the Himalayas via a series of tunnels and bridges, reaching Kathmandu and potentially continuing to additional Nepalese cities. The engineering challenges would be immense, requiring tunnels through some of the world's highest mountains and bridges spanning deep valleys. The cost estimates run into tens of billions of dollars. For Nepal, this railway represents a transformative opportunity. Currently, Nepal's trade with China requires goods to travel by truck over treacherous mountain roads, often impassable during monsoon seasons. A railway would provide year-round, high-capacity access to Chinese markets, dramatically reducing transportation costs and opening new economic possibilities. Consider the impact. Nepalese agricultural products could reach Chinese consumers fresh and affordable. Chinese manufactured goods could flow to Nepal more cheaply, benefiting Nepalese consumers and businesses. Tourism could expand further as Chinese visitors, the world's largest outbound tourism market, could reach Nepal more easily. The economic multiplier effects could transform Nepal from one of South Asia's poorest nations into a thriving trade corridor connecting China with the subcontinent. But China doesn't build multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects in countries that publicly accuse it of fraud and refuse to honor existing agreements. The Pokhara Airport controversy has reportedly caused Beijing to quietly reassess the railway project's viability. Some Chinese analysts have suggested that if Nepal cannot be trusted to honor agreements or will buckle to American pressure, then investing tens of billions of dollars in Nepalese infrastructure becomes untenable. Should China suspend or cancel the railway project, Nepal would lose perhaps its single greatest opportunity for economic transformation. No other country possesses both the financial capacity and technical expertise to undertake such a challenging project. India, Nepal's other large neighbor, has shown little interest in financing major infrastructure investments in Nepal beyond what serves Indian strategic interests. The historical context of Chinese assistance. To fully appreciate the stakes, we should examine the longer history of China-Nepal relations and Chinese development assistance. Since 1960, when the two countries established formal diplomatic relations, China has been a consistent partner in Nepal's development. Over 6 decades, Chinese assistance has touched nearly every sector of Nepalese society. In hydropower, China helped construct the Upper Tamakoshi hydroelectric project, a 456-megawatt facility that transformed Nepal from a power-importing nation into one with surplus electricity for export. This single project not only provided energy security, but created a new revenue stream as Nepal began selling electricity to India. In transportation, beyond Pokhara Airport, China built highways connecting remote Nepalese communities to markets, reducing isolation and poverty. Chinese engineers constructed bridges spanning deep gorges, making previously inaccessible regions reachable year-round. In disaster preparedness, China provided early warning systems for earthquakes and floods, critical assistance for a country sitting atop one of the world's most seismically active zones. After Nepal's devastating 2015 earthquake that killed nearly 9,000 people, China was among the first to provide emergency relief and long-term reconstruction assistance. In telecommunications, Chinese companies helped Nepal expand mobile phone coverage and internet access to rural areas, connecting previously isolated communities to the digital economy. In education, China has provided thousands of scholarships for Nepalese students to study at Chinese universities, building people-to-people ties and training Nepal's next generation of professionals. This assistance wasn't trivial or self-serving. Without Chinese support, Nepal's infrastructure deficit would be far worse, its economy more constrained, and its development prospects dimmer. While some critics characterize Belt and Road projects as debt traps, the reality in Nepal has been more nuanced. Infrastructure that functions, creates jobs, and provides genuine economic benefits, financed on terms more generous than commercial lending markets would offer. Against this backdrop of 6 decades of partnership, Nepal's sudden pivot to accusing China of predatory practices and demanding debt forgiveness appears not just ungrateful, but strategically short-sighted. The broader implications. The Pokhara Airport controversy extends beyond bilateral relations between Kathmandu and Beijing. It offers a window into the complex dynamics reshaping global development finance and great power competition in the developing world. For other developing nations watching this dispute, several lessons emerge. First, infrastructure partnerships with China can deliver results. Pokhara Airport opened on time, accounting for pandemic delays, functions well, and has exceeded performance projections. Second, however, such partnerships exist within a broader geopolitical context where pressure from other powers can complicate relationships and create difficult choices. For China, the episode highlights the challenges of using infrastructure development as a tool of influence. Even successful projects delivering genuine benefits can become politicized when recipients face competing pressures. Beijing may need to consider not just technical and financial aspects of projects, but also the political resilience of partner governments to external pressure. For the United States, the situation presents both an opportunity and a test. If Nepal ultimately accepts the MCC Compact and distances itself from Chinese projects, it validates the American approach of offering grant-based assistance as an alternative to Chinese loans. However, if the shift proves unstable, or if American aid fails to materialize as promised, it could reinforce perceptions that U.S. development engagement lacks the consistency and scale of Chinese programs. For India, Nepal's largest trading partner and closest cultural relation, the controversy presents uncomfortable choices.